We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, Thursday, January 22nd, 2026, coming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod, YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast, also the audio format, now on Spotify, guys. If you haven't already, subscribe there. If you've already subscribed there, you might need to unsubscribe and then resubscribe. It's a whole technical thing, but we're excited. I finally worked out the imports there, try to grow on the audio side on Spotify, iTunes, and iHeart. Today is Thursday. We're going to be drilling into a concept of playing to the crowd and how the communist left in this country is extremely proficient at it, and the Republicans tend to suck at it. So we're going to talk about how Black women are fighting racism by being racist. The New York Times is telling its readers it's bad that shelters are empty. The Washington Post suggests that ICE engaged in a murder of an illegal alien. 93% of media coverage of ICE is negative. And then Donald Trump softening on things like abortion, deportations of illegal aliens, and even government stimmy checks. And we will close it out with a look at some pretty obviously fake and false FBI statistics, because they're throwing the red meat out there. They haven't had a whole lot of wins. They got to get it somehow. So a lot to get to. Let's get after it. Anytime you're speaking to an audience, you have to kind of know that audience. That takes experience. You walk into a room, you have some prepared remarks or some things that you have on your mind that you want to get out there. It might be received really well, might be received really poorly. How many times have we seen comedians go in with the same stand-up material and they could kill or they could bomb? There's a lot of different factors that weigh into it: the size of the room, the acoustics, the type of the audience, their expectations. I've had the opportunity in the last few years to give several dozen speeches, some to hundreds, if not 1,000 people. Others in a little more quaint environment, maybe a half dozen people. And every single time, regardless of what I was endeavoring to get across, the information there, I always took it upon myself to try to feel out the crowd, know the audience, because you want to play to that crowd because you want the experience to be positive for everyone. One of the largest fears that people have is public speaking. Now, I tell my kids this: if you're ever in a situation where you have to give some public remarks, it's completely natural. You're going to feel a little bit nervous. But the biggest thing that you should remember at all times is the crowd is rooting for you. Nobody wants to see you bomb. So they will do little things to help you along the way if you struggle. If you tell a joke that's mildly funny, there will be uproarious laughter because they want you to succeed. It's a challenge, though, to read the room. If I've got an academic crowd, which I've spoken to, a crowd of a book club, they're not really interested in jokes or off-colored humor. But if I'm talking to a more of an activist group, they want to get fired up. There's a different way of presenting the exact same material. That's the point. Now, the left in this country is extremely proficient at it, and they will present it to their crowd so their crowd can get exactly the message that they want them to get out of it. Meanwhile, information that is contrary to the point that they're trying to make will be there, plainly visible. So let's get to some examples of that. And we can begin at the New York Times, which is what one point a newspaper. And this is a story about how Black women are turning to one another as their career paths suddenly recede. Because it's the old comment that the New York Times, their asteroid is about to hit and women and minorities will be affected worst. So from the piece, they go to the fields right away, and this woman whose name is Naniqua Obikwe She started a WhatsApp group chat called Black Women Rising and posted a link to it on Threads. And she had a whole bunch of people reach out because the job market is not great right now for anybody, but because it's the New York Times, they want to make sure that you find out that it's especially bad for people who have tanner skin for reasons of racism. It's certainly implied by the headlines, but if you actually took the time to read, you'd find out that that's not what it is. Now, the average unemployment rate at the end of 2025 for Black women in America was 7.8%. That's extremely high. The actual average overall for the nation was about 4.4%. So it looks like there's an overrepresentation of Black women in the unemployment line. Is that because of the president, because he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler, and he's clearly a racist? Or are there other factors in there? I mean, you would hope that the audience that reads the New York Times would really want to figure out the real cause, but that's not it. They're reading the New York Times, which was at one point a newspaper, but now just does straight propaganda. So they could walk away from this piece thinking, America is the most racist country out there. That's why everybody in the world wants to come here. But what are the actual statistics? What are the actual numbers reveal here? Well, it is a very high unemployment rate, 7.8%. And the New York Times actually goes on to list that the most heavily impacted cohort within Black females, because they've even have that one set up into different subsets, is college-educated Black females. Well, is the country racist or not? Well, it seems that Black college-educated women tend to be overrepresented in a couple of different industries that had some scalebacks. Now, Black women represent about, I looked it up, I think 6% of the American population. And yet they're 12% of federal workers. So double what their actual proportion is. And because the Trump administration came in and they had the DOGE cuts, and then they had the fork, that was the offer to let employees leave and collect full pay and benefits for the next 6, 8, 9 months, or just even shutting down entire programs and different bureaus within the federal bureaucracy. As a result, there was a disproportionate amount of Black females who were affected by that. Also, human resources in private industry have been pretty heavily impacted by artificial intelligence. They don't need somebody there to cull through the applications for jobs. They can have HAL do it now. And although Black women represent 6% of the population, they represent 10% of human resources. So same sort of thing. There's going to be scalebacks. There will be a disproportionate amount of impact on that particular demographic. Hardly a case to be made that there's a racist element here at all, but the New York Times doesn't want you to know that. They're playing to the crowd. They want the people reading The Old Gray Lady to believe that not only is this country irredeemably racist, but it's probably the fault of the president because he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. Now, they dug a little bit deeper in, and they go to the fields and they give you some examples and they present them as negative. But if I read it, I see it as kind of a cautionary tale, maybe a lesson to be drawn here. If we're actually interested in information and learning things, okay, there's value here. That's not the crowd they're playing to, though. What am I talking about? Well, back to the piece, again from the New York Times. Black women turn to one another as career paths suddenly recede. Here are the examples we get. Erica Hatfield, she was laid off from the Education Reform Now, which is a nonprofit think tank where she was the vice president of communications. She has since stopped identifying her race on job applications. I've never put my race on a job application. That just seems like really poor practice. Why would it matter what color your skin is when you're applying for a job? Actually, it's kind of illegal to put that in there. So I think she learned a valuable life lesson there. I think if she puts that on her application, they know what her priorities are and are maybe less inclined to hire her if they're actually interested in following the law. So that should be a good thing, but it's not, according to the New York Times. Second example, her name is Liz Rini. She ran a leadership development program for Black men because a Black woman can teach leadership to Black men for reasons, and helped plan celebrations for Hispanic Heritage Month, even though she's not Hispanic. Uh, again, reasons. So she had poor choice of job and got laid off. She has now stopped making reference to DEI when she submits her resume for a job. Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion is the death of everything important. That's probably closer to what it actually stands for, because it's doing away with meritocracy. It's hiring people and promoting them based on immutable characteristics, which have no impact on their ability to do a job. If you prioritize things like the color of your skin or what you got dangling between your legs or your religion or who you like to have sex with over actually being able to do the job, then your product or service will necessarily suffer. And since the new presidential administration came in and kind of said DEI is now dead, not only the federal government, but a lot of the private sector has shifted away from that. This was clearly a very important thing for Liz Renee, but now she's again, like the prior example, learned the lesson that you probably shouldn't put that out there if it's not what people want. And the last example, again from the New York Times, it is this woman named Francesca Weems. She worked at a public relations firm guiding DEI strategies for their clients and overseeing all DEI hiring and retention initiatives inside the firm. She was laid off and she still wants to work in the industry. So she's hanging out a shingle, her own consulting firm. Good for her. Maybe she will find some super woke examples. But all of this got me thinking about another video that's been kind of circulating out there, because this article, the premise is that these women are leaning on each other for support, and although their industries being human resources, because artificial intelligence has now taken over significant swaths of that, or federal government, which is probably a good thing that we're cutting into that fat a little bit, and those roles are not essential, and the American people should not be on the hook for funding non-essential jobs through our tax dollars, i.e. theft from the government. What's the difference between that and saying, well, we can't have the automobile invented? I mean, think of all the people that are out there repairing horse carriages. Times change. People have to evolve with it. Are you a Luddite? Do you want to keep human resource professionals around that work slower and less efficiently than the artificial intelligence? But it got me thinking again about this video from our former First Lady and where her priorities are, because according to the New York Times, the Black ladies have to lean on each other. Michelle Obama concurs with that sentiment, and she, like the New York Times, is playing to a very specific crowd. And here's her remarks.
If I hear of someone whose fashion that I like and I know that they're a person of color, I try to make it a point. But the clothes have to be available. Right. You know, I think we can all do some work to think about that balance in our wardrobes. You know, what does our closet look like and who's in it? Mm-hmm. Who are we supporting in it?
Right.
You know, and I think if you have the money to buy Chanel, mm-hmm. then you have the money to buy everybody.
Right.
Right. And so let us be mindful, I think would be my advice.
Yeah.
All right, so Michelle Obama is encouraging people who have her skin complexion to buy only clothing from people who make it that have this same skin complexion, regardless of the quality of it or what your taste preferences are. That doesn't play to the American Radicals podcast audience very well, because we buy clothes that fit and we like. We don't really care who makes them, as long as it's not slave labor. But Michelle Obama, her audience, her ilk, that gets them all up in a lather. Mm-hmm. Yeah, preach. You could hear all the affirmation going on in that room. She was not only playing to the viewing audience, she was playing very specifically to those other 3 or 4 ladies that were sitting around her. They're communists. They're very good at reading the room. And you can say some pretty abhorrent and racist things. Nobody bats an eye at it. In fact, they agree. Other examples from media that's gone out there and is making a case that is a good thing, and yet they're going to argue it's a bad thing because it involves illegal aliens. This one, again, comes from the New York Times, and it pertains to a shelter in McAllen, Texas. The headline: After Trump shut down the border, a Texas shelter for migrants emptied. So if you dig through it, you come to find out that this is a nun who runs this shelter in McAllen, Texas. Her name is Sister Norma Pimentel. And as far as back as she can remember, the shelter that she runs at the border in McAllen has been crowded with thousands of migrants, illegal aliens. But ever since President Trump retook the White House and has embarked on, as they characterize it, an aggressive immigration enforcement, which means he's doing the job that we would expect of the executive to protect the borders, the very finite list of responsibilities that the American people have for their federal government. But since they've essentially sealed off that border, we haven't had the thousands and millions of illegal aliens streaming across it. There's not people that need to go to the shelter anymore. With no migrants to house, the staff and volunteers at Sister Pimentel's shelter have pivoted to help residents of McAllen. And that's a problem for the New York Times and the people who read the New York Times. They're very upset that a shelter that gives shelter, food, and clothing to the needy can't give it away to illegal aliens. This is a shelter that's funded mostly by charitable donations, but they do accept some government money, your money. And the New York Times and their audience are very upset that it cannot be shoveled away to people who are not American. Now, the obvious thing that they could do is pivot away to serve the community. Talked about before, the bullseye theory. You want to serve those around you, yourself, your family, your neighbors, your community. You certainly don't want to prioritize other countries' citizens ahead of people in your own community, unless you read the New York Times or you're the Sister Pimentel, who's apparently been awarded some sort of designation as being an advocate for illegal aliens. She's remorseful about the entire situation. She's remorseful that she's having to serve this local community. And the New York Times is remorseful that they have to report that this makes the Republican mayor kind of happy. So from this piece, which they did quite a bit of investment on. Look at this video that's playing out here. You have to come and watch us. If you're only listening to the audio, we're about 17 minutes into the show. I mean, there's just lots of illustrations going on in this piece from the New York Times. But the New York Times is very unhappy because Javier Villalobos, he's the mayor of McAllen, and he's a registered Republican. He said that he would rather see this local organization help the local population than take it to the migrants. So now he's happy. Ergo, the people who read the New York Times and write for the New York Times and prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens are very unhappy. And they message it that way, like, oh my goodness, this is a tragedy. This is a tragedy that this shelter can no longer cater to illegal aliens, and they have to help the plebeian swine of McAllen, Texas, who all hail from America. Now, there's two examples straight out of the New York Times, but a recent assessment was done, because we can pivot away from the New York Times at one point, a newspaper, to other examples. Let's go to nightly news. CBS, NBC, ABC, the primetime news that comes on at night. If you want to find out what happened that day, are they playing to a certain audience? Or are they unbiased? Where do they stand on this? Well, the perception is that they're presenting the facts to their audience, but their audience probably isn't our audience here on the AMRAD pod, because you actually care about what's true and what's factual and what's unbiased. If you watch ABC, NBC, CBS, you're getting straight propaganda. You might delude yourself into thinking that it's just like Walter Cronkite, who never gave you anything unbiased when the guy was lying about what was going on in Vietnam. But a recent study was done over by the Media Research Center, MRC, Newsbusters, and they just published it. It appears that over 90% of the coverage of ICE deportations going on from ABC, NBC, and CBS in their primetime spots has been negative. 91% negative from ABC, NBC, 96% negative from CBS. Only 1.5% of any of the Minneapolis-related coverage included any mention of crimes being committed by the illegal aliens who were being arrested and detained and deported. CBS never explicitly admitted that Nicole Good, who was the woman who was recently shot by an ICE officer, hit the agent with her car, and ABC and NBC did so only one time each. They're playing to their audience. They're pleasing the crowd, giving them everything they know. They know the audience. They know that audience wants to be angry. They're all lathered up. They want justification for doing some pretty awful and deplorable things, and they just need a little bit of extra motivation to do it. Who are this audience? Well, it could just be people on the street. It could be politicians themselves. I happen to have examples of both. So let's go to the politician first. This is a woman who's running for Congress in this actual district in Minneapolis and is out there blowing whistles. I thought this was a parody. It's not. It's real.
So we're out in the community being patrollers and observers, just had an interaction with ICE, pulled up alongside my vehicle, rolled down his window with his face mask on, waved at me, and then did this, I see you. They like to play games. We're moving on to check out some other vulnerable community spaces. This is what we can do. Got my whistle. These are what our days look like, friends.
Friends, comrades, just go out there and tweet your whistle at ICE. That's a good way to hashtag resist. But she's vying for the votes of the constituents there in that district. What was her name? Kayla Berg. She's running for Congress. Who are the sorts of people that are inclined to vote for Kayla? These people don't actually hail from the district. They are from North Carolina. They're not even the same state, but tomato, they're all kind of the same. These are the sorts of people that are out there blowing whistles, that are making eye contact with ICE, trying to protect their neighbors, their comrades. This is what a protest in Charlotte looks like. And I can't help but notice that they're all white people and all kind of boomer-esque age range.
This racist system has to fall.
Oh, they are just really enthralled to be out there. Very excited. This land is your land. This land is my land. A communist anthem. But the stories in the New York Times or coverage in nightly news, that's the audience that's picking that up, that wants that information. It's red meat for them. It's very profitable for those news outlets. It's going to be very lucrative for the politicians that run on that. Keep on it. Talked about New York Times. Let's go over to the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, which has an exclusive report about ICE murdering somebody. Headline: Medical examiner believes death of a man in ICE custody was homicide, recording says. The details of this one, you actually have to take the time to read this very long piece from Washington Post to find out what the straight dope is. The deceased is a Cuban immigrant, illegal alien. His name is Lunas Campos. He died following a struggle with detention staff, according to an eyewitness account and an internal ICE document. Now, a spokesperson for Department of Homeland Security, I believe the assistant secretary, said that Campos violently resisted the security staff and continued to attempt to take his life. During the ensuing struggle, Campos stopped breathing and lost consciousness. Oh, he tried to kill himself, and then the staff went to intervene, and he wound up dying anyway. A homicide ruling, though, from the medical examiner would almost certainly draw attention onto this camp, because there's been lots of substandard conditions and physical abuse. I don't care, because they're illegal aliens. They deserve to be deported from the country. Why do I care about their conditions? Court records show that Lunas Campos was convicted of several crimes. So not just coming across our border, which is a crime. But if you want to go with the defense that we normally see from Washington Post and New York Times and ABC and NBC and ABC, is that these people are not committing crimes. They're the best of us. Well, apparently, Mr. Campos was not one of the best of us because he was convicted of aggravated assaults with a weapon and first-degree sexual abuse involving a child under 11 years old. So, couple things. I don't care about the conditions in this camp. They don't want to be subject to those conditions. They could just self-deport, make our lives much easier. Also, the medical examiner listed this as a homicide. Now, homicide has a certain connotation, but language does matter. It has a specific meaning. Medical examiner has a finite amount of options to check off on when somebody dies to how to rule the death. It could be an accident. It could be natural causes. It could be suicide, or it could be homicide. Now, people hear homicide and they think murder, and the Washington Post knows it, which is why they put it in the headline to the story, which I'll throw up again. The headline, medical examiner believes death of man in ICE custody was homicide. Homicide doesn't mean murder, doesn't mean that a person through malice went and took another person's life. It just means that people were involved in the death, like if somebody was trying to kill themselves and they tried to cut him down from hanging himself with a sheet, and then he died anyway, it would still be a homicide because the suicide wasn't completed. But know your audience, play to the crowd, put homicide up there, and make sure you bring up an opportunity to talk about how ICE probably, murdered a guy because you have an eyewitness account, an eyewitness who's an illegal alien staying at the facility, and I'm sure has a very unbiased Walter Cronkite-esque take on the situation, not trying to personally benefit himself. Now, we can go, because that's all really good examples. I mean, they're evil, they're diabolical, deplorable, despicable, any other sort of descriptor you want to use for the communists, but you have to tip your cap. Sometimes Patton just has to tip his cap to Rommel. Job well done. You got your people out there in the street singing "This land is your land," or your elected officials blowing their whistles, thinking that they're hashtag resisting. And we're on a knife's edge right now. Things getting extremely violent in this country because the media, because politicians on the left, the communists in this country, are so effective at throwing that red meat out there, playing to their crowd. Now let's contrast it. Let's flip the script, look at the other side of the coin. How are Republicans doing? The most powerful Republican in the country, in the world at this point, the elected president, Donald Trump, he's not playing to his crowd very well. Got a couple examples I want to get to. First one is going to be deportations. So we saw how the communists were able to portray it. ICE is out there murdering these illegal aliens. We have to make sure that we got our eye on them. This is the state of play right now. We're really at war. Well, one side sort of embraces this cold civil war, increasingly becoming hot. What about the leader of the free world, the leader of the Republican Party, who's out there saying that deportations, maybe we could kind of soften on them? President Trump.
Many countries opened up their prisons and dropped them into the United States. Those are the people who are getting out. And we have a lot of heart. They said, you got to lighten up on this. We have a lot of heart for people. They came in illegally, but they're good people, and they're working now on farms, and they're working in luncheonettes and hotels and all. And we're looking to get the criminals out right now, the criminals. And I think it's very important. I mean, every once in a while you see a story, we take somebody. He should be out because they came in illegally. So in theory, they should be. But we're focused on the murderers, the drug dealers, the mentally insane. We have a lot of mentally insane killers. I mean, you can't even talk to them. It'd be nice if you could have a little reason, but you can't even reason. These are seriously ill people. You have a couple of countries where they were loaded up. Their mental institutions and insane asylums were loaded to the gills. They couldn't get. They're empty now.
You got to lighten up. That's what the president said. We really only want to get the worst offenders. I think Donald Trump's a lot like a couch cushion. The last person that talked to him leaves the biggest impression. What do you want to bet that he was talking to Lindsey Graham right before that? Or somebody with that vein of thinking? I know that I didn't vote for that. I voted for the deportation of 20, 30, 40, 50 million illegal aliens. How many of you voted to, just the soft touch, just nibble around the edge? We don't need to get them all. I mean, they are technically criminals, but we want the worst offenders, the ones that they emptied the prisons to send here, not just the millions of people that have come across our border, that are taking our housing opportunities, taking our work opportunities, stealing identities. None of those are egregious. None of those are sex trafficking or murder or rape. They're still crimes. They're still harming our social compact because none of these people actually bought into our social compact. Who is the audience for that? I really am genuinely asking the question. Who does that make happy? Does it make MAGA happy? No. Does it make the people singing "This land is our land, this land is your land" in the streets happy to say, President makes a good point there. He's only going to go after the worst people? Oh, okay. I'd really consider voting for him and his party next time. No, there's no audience for it. He's failing to read the room. And that's just one issue. It's a very large issue, one of the top two issues in the last election. One was inflation, the other one was illegal immigration. Then there's this other issue that I think you can make a pretty strong case is the most important issue, and that's life. Remember, Donald Trump, his administration is the most pro-life administration in the history of the country. He went to the March for Life. He's pushing out all the IVF stuff. We just want to have lots of babies. He softened on illegal aliens, and now he's softening on abortion, government-funded abortion. This piece comes from americamagazine.org. Headline: Pro-life groups push back after Trump tells House GOP to be flexible on taxpayer-funded abortions. During a speech to the House Republican Conference, the president suggested that addressing rising healthcare costs could give them an edge over Democrats in the upcoming midterms. And then he said, now you have to be a little flexible on Hyde. You know that. You got to be a little flexible. You got to work something. You got to use ingenuity. Well, he is the art of the deal guy, right? Which is why, parenthetically, I think Donald Trump would be extremely happy when the Democrats win in the midterms, the House, and maybe even the Senate, because then he gets to just make deals because he doesn't care what the actual resolution is to the situation, what the actual solution comes to. As long as it's a deal, he's pretty good with that. But he wants the Republicans to soften on Hyde. The Hyde Amendment is the amendment that says that the federal government won't fund baby murder. It will not go into any appropriations. Now, money is fungible, but it's a little bit more than symbolic. It does actually reduce the number of babies that get murdered in this country. And now Donald Trump, in the interest of making a deal, is saying, maybe we should negotiate on that. Maybe we should allow more baby murder so that we can get a deal on Obamacare, so that we can get a deal on the biggest millstone around the Obama administration in its first term that resulted in the largest flip in modern electoral history in the House, the red wave, the Tea Party wave, because people were so angry that Obamacare passed. Now the Republican position, the Overton window has shifted so much that we got to get a deal on government-funded health care, which is Republican, conservative. So in order to get the deal on Obamacare, we need to murder more babies. Who's the audience for this? Read the room. Who does this make happy? The Democrats are going to be very happy to get their subsidies for Obamacare. They're going to claim a victory. What about the pro-life people? What about the churchgoers that pulled the lever for Donald Trump and the Republicans in 2024 in mass? Huge majority. Is that going to read the room and make them very happy? Are they going to stand and give an ovation? Nope. Another failure. How about economics? Illegal aliens, life. Now we have stimmy checks, universal basic income. Donald Trump again says he's committed to the $2,000 tariff dividend, as it's being characterized. It's a stimmy check. White House is now standing behind it. Carolyn Levitt, spokesperson, came out and said that Donald Trump has made it known he wants to make it happen, and the team is working on it. And here is the actual Truth Social posting from the president himself. Quote from Donald J. Trump at Real Donald Trump. People that are against tariffs are fools. We're now the richest, most respected country in the world with almost no inflation and a record stock market price. 401ks are highest ever. We're taking in trillions of dollars and we'll soon begin paying down our enormous debt, $37 trillion. Record investment in the USA, plants and factories going up all over the place, a dividend of at least $2,000 a person, not including high income people, will be paid to everyone. So, what is a tariff dividend? I mean, universal basic income. I mean, government stimulus check. The argument is that we've taken in about $200 to $300 billion in tariff revenue. And because we all had to take the hit and buy more expensive things, and if you make under $100,000, the government's going to send you a $2,000 check. Well, in your own post, which was inaccurate, Mr. President, you said that inflation is almost gone. No, inflation is actually a problem. What do you think sending 300, oh wait, not 300 billion. No, this is actually going to cost $600 billion into the system will do. We took in 300, but we're going to send 600 billion into the economy to say, thank you everybody for biting the bullet on those tariffs. And that will cause the prices to increase again, because the concept of inflation is there's too many dollars chasing around too few goods. And when there's too many dollars, the prices go up. So this will only compound the problem further. I thought we were going to clean up. I thought we were going to clean up the government and scale it back to such an extent that the tariffs would not be used to give us stimmy checks, but to fund the entire government. But that would require like 90 to 95% of cuts. The sort of cuts that would lead a lot of Black women to not have jobs anymore for the government. We haven't seen any of that. We haven't seen any of those results. And the messaging here is, we'll say, suboptimal, to be the most charitable. Now, that's three pretty bad ones against the president. And let's go to the ex-girlfriend to close things out here on the American Radicals podcast, because Kash Patel, director of the FBI, is extremely thirsty. He wants Dad's approval, even though Dad has fumbled on illegal aliens and the economy and abortion. Kash Patel, he wants to please the boss. So they've been messaging really hard in the 1 year point of the Trump administration about just how awesome the FBI has done. Kash Patel went on with Sean Hannity last night or 2 nights ago and was asked about just how awesome the FBI is doing. We'll give the director the opportunity, and then we'll respond to show you just how everything he said is a crock.
Arrests more than 450 victims. If you look at where we were a year ago today, the FBI working with their partners, an amazing 67,000 arrests, which is a 200% increase from the year prior. Rather impressive, Director.
Let's just break down those numbers and hit pause for a second. 67,000 criminal arrests by this FBI under President Trump and the Department of Justice. That is a 200% increase. We're talking about lives saved. We're talking about children safeguarded. We're talking about murders prevented. A 210% increase in criminal gangs taken down. Trende Aragua and other criminal gangs. We're talking about 6,000 child victims found and located. We're talking about the seizure of 150 million lethal doses of fentanyl. That's up 31%. These are just some of the record-breaking numbers President Trump has delivered, and this FBI is tremendously proud to be leading out on this effort. The numbers continue. We're not just talking about about violent felon arrest alone. We're saving the American taxpayer while we do it. We slashed $314 million in wasteful contracts immediately. We took another $1.2 billion sledgehammer to bogus contracts, legacy contracts from the Biden administration. That's nearly 10% of our budget. And we're also moving into a new FBI headquarters, saving the taxpayers $5 billion from the behemoth that the Congress and others wanted to build in Maryland. We're giving the FBI a safe, secure workplace in the Ronald Reagan building. We're already making that move. And when that move is complete, we are going to shut down the Hoover building once and for all, which has been a sign of weaponization of law enforcement that we have been battling and continue to battle. It is more than just putting out statistics. We are saving lives at a record pace, and that's because this FBI is getting after it with our state and local partners and our interagency partners, and the Department of Justice is leading out on compelling prosecutions from coast to coast.
All right, there's a lot there. That was a longer clip than I tend to like to play. It was almost 2 minutes, but everything that guy just said was a crock. We'll start from the back and work our way forward. Working with our local partners has really been the reason behind it. You mean Cash stealing credit for all of the local police arrests? Or how about your federal partners? Those 67,000 arrests, a 200% increase. Those are almost entirely you taking credit for ICE detainers because you happen to have a FBI agent on the arrest team, even though ICE made the arrest, did all the intel, drew up the ops plan. You were just kind of there. So ICE does a detainer, FBI claims credit. Local police make an arrest, FBI claims credit. It's gone on forever. They just hype the numbers even more. Oh, we're saving the American people money by not moving to a new headquarters. But you are, sir, moving, which I don't think is free when you're actually in a facility right now that is a sunk cost. But, we have to make it a museum to the deep state. That was the promise. The promise was make it a museum to the deep state because you were going to put the padlock on the door and essentially shut down the entire thing. As long as you're talking about sunk costs, you have Redstone Arsenal down in Huntsville, Alabama. It's a $2.5 billion facility. You could just go there as long as you're moving. Why don't you move out of the swamp? No, you don't want to do that. You might have to give up the brand new BMW that you made the FBI buy you while you were trying to save on costs. And back to some of the facts and figures. ICE arrests, taking credit for those. Local arrests, taking credit for those. Let's just say that I'm full of it. All right. Let's just give beyond any measure of any doubt. We'll give every benefit of the doubt to Kash Patel and actually have a nice graphic of how awesome the FBI is, according to Kash Patel. This is the illustration that was put up when he was responding to Sean Hannity's question, I guess, or comment. You're awesome, sir. Tell me how awesome you are. Well done, Sean Hannity. And it shows 67,000 arrests in 2025 versus 22,500 under the Biden administration. Couple points. The FBI is supposed to do long-term, complex investigations that result in arrests. That would imply that those investigations were going on in 2024. They just happened to arrest the person in 2025. So it's not really accurate to say that they launched everything in January and by December had them all wrapped up. No. But let's give them even further benefit of the doubt. Let's say that every one of those 67,000 arrests didn't come from local police, didn't come from ICE, weren't even started investigating them until 2025. That would mean an $11 billion agency arrested 67,000 people, which would mean that you paid $164,000 per arrest. $164,000 to arrest one person. We're facts and figures based here, right, Cash? Does that seem like a really good return on investment? No, it seems kind of ridiculous. Seems like a really bad investment. But don't let the actual information, the actual truth get in the way of a narrative. Who is this playing to, by the way? It's playing to the clapping seals who watch Sean Hannity, but that's about it. Anybody that for a moment tries to pay attention to what's going on is saying, yeah. What about Epstein? What about coronavirus madness? Did you hold any of those people accountable? What about the January 6th pipe bomb entrapment? What about the January 6th abuses that went on? You talk all the time about Crossfire Hurricane. Where's the accountability on that one? Election fraud? Zero, 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 zero. And if you want to talk about facts and figures, Kash Patel has flown on the FBI director jet more than Christopher Wray did during his tenure. Who's the audience? Not reading the room. One side is, one side isn't. And it's pretty clear the way that things are trending politically in this country, that the side that has read the room properly and not just messaged, but actually comported themselves to listen to that base, to actually get elected or appointed, to do something rather than to just be something like a social media influencer or a person who goes on Sean Hannity and gives some comments that are completely a crock, or just the president himself just kind of bebopping along saying, I don't have any other political ambitions beyond this. It's really nice to live in the White House for the next couple of years. One side gets elected to do something. One side gets elected to be something. And the way things are going, the side that's going to do something is going to do a heck of a lot more come next January. All right, so that's the end of today's American Radicals podcast. Kind of zeroing in on playing to the crowd, messaging things. I talked about how I don't like the NFL at all because I don't like being told that I'm a racist. Like, I kind of feel like Michelle Obama is yelling at me anytime it's on TV. But I found today's palate cleanse. I feel like this would play to the crowd. It would play to people who are just like something good and wholesome. And this is a legendary quarterback, Joe Montana, who figured out how to call his wife from the sideline. Palate cleanse.
I don't know what made me do it, but one day I hung up and I'm sitting there going, I wonder if these things call out. So I picked up the phone, I hit, what do you do normally? Hit 9, right? Gives you an outside line. I hit 9, got a dial tone. I dialed my house.
And the phone would ring, and I'd pick it up, and it'd be Joe. I go, what are you doing?
I go, hey, how you doing? What are you doing? What do you do? Who is it? What are you doing? Where are you calling me from?
He goes, I'm calling you. I'm calling you to say I love you. And I go, I love you. How are you calling? He goes, they have an outside line. I check in every stadium.
I go, I'm on the sideline phone. I found out that it calls. So I thought I'd give you a call since I'm just sitting here waiting to call in.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, guys, that's the end. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a nice thumbs up, like, subscribe, do all those things on rumble.com/amradpod, YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. Check out the Spotify, subscribe there if you haven't already. Or if you already have, unsubscribe, resubscribe, do that as well. Help us to expand out and radicalize as many Americans as we can to our commonsensical way of thinking. We will be back with you tomorrow, Friday, 12 o'clock Eastern time. And until then, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.